Welcome to the Misophonia podcast. This is season 6, episode 20. My name is Adil Ahmad, and I have misophonia. This week I'm talking to Jay. I thought this was an amazing story because it really symbolizes how little misophonia is respected in society. See, Jay's mom is a therapist, yet she used Jay's misophonia as a weapon against her growing up, tormenting her during their arguments. I'll let that sink in for a second because you'll hear a lot more about it in our conversation. We also talk about what it was like to get her first office job, why she hasn't told anyone about her misophonia, except her now fiancé, and we talk a bit about how she approached that conversation. But mostly we talk a lot about her mom. And this is actually also one of my favorite conversations because we talk about gaslighting a lot and how we misophones are gaslit for how we feel, and our feelings are minimized, dismissed, and misunderstood without ever being given any benefit of the doubt. As always, let me know what you think. You can reach out by email at hello@misophoniapodcast.com or hit me up on Instagram or Facebook at Misophonia Podcast. And as I always say, wherever you listen to the show, if you can leave a quick review or rating, it'll help us get up in the algorithms and reach more misophones. Thanks for the incredible ongoing support of our Patreon supporters. If you feel like contributing, you can read all about it at patreon.com/misophonia podcast. All right, here's my conversation with Jay. Jay, welcome to the podcast. Good to have you here.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So yeah, let's just ease into maybe just kind of like, whereabouts are you located?
I am in San Diego, California. I was born and raised here. Unfortunately, I've never lived anywhere else, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's where I am.
And yeah, so I guess we were talking a little bit earlier. You're pretty new to the misophonia community. And I guess, yeah, how did you know, when did you learn about it? When did you learn that it had a name? What kind of led you to that and what happened around that time?
As far as like finding the community or finding out
Yeah.
about misophonia.
Well, let's start with finding out about misophonia. Yeah.
So misophonia, I actually first heard the word when I was a teenager. I think I was like 14 or 15 years old. My mom is actually a licensed marriage and family therapist,
Mm-hmm.
and I had had trouble with what we found out later was misophonia my entire life, and she just Googled the symptoms one day and was like, voila, this is what you have.
Mm.
Yep.
Okay. And this is when you were a teenager.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
had been
Okay.
struggling with the symptoms of it. I mean, honestly, as far back as I can remember, like even when I was, a very small child, I remember having real problems with, things like people chewing gum or smacking their lips when they're eating, or even sometimes like people singing.
Mm-hmm. But a real small child, do you know around which age or just kind of as far back as you can remember?
Definitely earlier than the age of 6, because my younger
Mm.
brother was born when I was about 7, and I was already having issues then that I can recall. So, and I have a sense that it had been going on for a while. So I honestly couldn't give you an age, but definitely
Yeah.
before the age of 6.
And around that time, it was, so yeah, you said like the usual kind of chewing mouth sounds, things like that.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
what
and
were you,
like off key singing.
are you a singer, musician, by the way? But now
Uh,
or?
Not by trade or anything, it's just
Mm-hmm.
sort of a casual one. I played piano for well over a decade. I've
Mm-hmm.
done Suzuki violin. I play guitar on occasion.
Mm-hmm.
I do like to sing. I'm just not good at it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I come from a musical family.
Gotcha. By trade, musical family, or just
Yeah,
everyone?
my dad was first chair trumpet in the symphony here for like 30 years.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So how did I'm assuming, yeah, the home family members were kind of first triggers. I would imagine. What was their, and correct me if I'm wrong, but then what was their reactions to you as you were, and how, well, actually I should ask first, how were you reacting? Like how were you expressing yourself at that early age?
So back then I obviously didn't understand what was going on. And, now looking back, I can say with certainty that like my fight or flight response was triggered, as I know it's triggered for a lot of people. And so I would react like I would feel like this weird pit in my chest. I would start to feel
Mm,
like angry at the sound going on and or that I needed to get away as quickly as possible.
yeah.
So I remember like covering my ears. I remember begging my mom to stop chewing gum or asking her to stop singing, asking my dad to like not chew with his mouth open and stuff. And it wasn't always in a very, polite polite
Yeah.
manner. A lot of times it was very frustrated because I would, I had a sense that this wasn't like something that you do. And so I would try to like stick it out for as long as I possibly could, but then it would just boil over at a certain point. So I would speak a lot of times out of frustration.
How did your family members react?
Not well.
Okay.
I don't think anybody's family members react well. Am I right?
Yeah, right. Well, and that's where the kind of the all that that shame and that kind of like bottling things up that kind of just kind of keeps coming at us starts. Did you start to feel that kind of like feeling kind of guilty? I shouldn't be feeling like this.
Oh,
Shame.
absolutely,
Yeah.
immediately, because um I was told, that is not a normal thing to ask. Don't
Hmm.
ask it again. That is your problem, not my problem. Do not ask us again.
And this is
Um,
even when your mom was an LMFT therapist, right?
oh yes, there's a whole
Yeah.
thing there.
Okay. Let's crack that open. That sounds interesting.
Oh boy, you're
'Cause
just like my therapist.
yeah, yeah. Well, just to remind the audience, I am not a therapist, but I like to crack things. I like to kind of like crack things like this open. I mean, we'll get to it when we get to it. But as you were growing up, were triggers starting to multiply? Were they starting to get into school and whatnot?
Yeah, so I definitely I don't know that I necessarily experienced like more triggers happening, but the ones that did trigger me became worse. Uh
Hmm.
Initially it was just sort of like with the people closest to me, and like if we went out to a store or something and somebody was popping and snapping gum, I'd be irritated,
Yeah.
but like it wouldn't be horrific. But then as the years went on and as I continued to keep the feelings bottled up inside, it got worse and worse. And going to elementary school, kids don't really have like the best manners yet. And so that was, fairly difficult to deal with. In a quiet class, if a kid was like sucking on a piece of candy or chewing gum again or eating or something like that, it was very, very difficult to deal with. And I would excuse myself to go to the bathroom often
Mm. Yeah. Okay.
because
Yeah.
I didn't feel empowered enough to ask
Say it.
somebody
Yeah.
to stop.
Yeah. Did you ever at some point start to tell people to kind of like tone it down, or you just did not?
No, I
Yeah.
never have.
Mm.
I throughout elementary school, middle school, high school, college, I've never asked a classmate not to. I internalize all of it, which is a failing of my own that I have to deal with. But I never ever asked anybody else to. I would just walk out of the classroom and stay out for as long as I felt was practicable, or I would just sort of internally self-destruct.
Yeah. Well, you're not alone there. I mean, well, we have internalized. I'll just generalize and say society has kind of put us to the bottom of the priority list of
Absolutely.
things to worry about. Just before we leave, kind of the early years, was there anything happening around in your early childhood that may have been kind of difficult? I don't know, like stresses, deaths in the family, or moving around. Well, you said you've always lived in San Diego, and just I don't know, anything you remember, anything being
Honest,
difficult over those?
not particularly.
Hmm.
I mean, generally speaking, I had a fairly good childhood. I mean, I my mom and I didn't really have a strained relationship until I was in my teen years. So before then, it was honestly okay. We moved to a different house when I was like about 8 years old. My younger brother was born when I was 7. I did have, I think one of my grandparents died around when I was 10.
Hmm.
Um, but honestly, it really, You
Pretty
know, it
typical stuff,
wasn't,
though. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it wasn't anything horrifically traumatic. You know, I didn't experience any sort of traumas back then. It was a generally very good childhood.
Hmm. And then those teenage years, with your, was it? Do you think it was like kind of misophonia related that you were starting to butt heads maybe with your mom?
No, not at all.
Hmm.
That was an entirely separate issue, although it did exacerbate the issues that I was
It didn't help,
experiencing
right?
with, yeah, not at all. Oh my God, it made things so much worse. And actually, my misophonia was weaponized as a way
Oh
to
no.
gaslight me
Okay.
and to make me feel less than. Like, for example, my mom would be chewing gum, and we'd be in a car, so I would be unable to leave. And I would beg her to stop. Like I would be like screaming and crying, like begging her to stop. You know that feeling when it just goes on for that long. And she would crinkle a piece of paper in her fingers and be like, "I'm not chewing gum. You're crazy. I'm just crinkling this paper in my hands." You know, and it would just be used as a way to torment me for whatever reason. So it just made things exponentially worse.
Yeah. Wow. No, we're very familiar with the car environment, and yeah, that's crazy. Oh, I should cut that out. I should not say the word crazy. I hear, but
Big C.
okay, yeah. And again, I mean, not to, I, in the heat of the moment, I want to make clear that we're not, parent blaming or anything. This is what happens. But again, this is, I mean, this is not a statement about your mom, but she was a therapist at this time, right, during the teenage years. And I just only mention that because even amongst like, skilled therapists, this was not known. It was not taken seriously. It still isn't really taken seriously. So it's not usually something that people are sensitive to.
Exactly. And there's a whole side thing that goes along with the
Hmm.
issues that I had with my mother. And yes, she has been a mental health professional for basically my entire life. But she has a lot of her own problems. And she and I had, she was extremely abusive towards me
Hmm.
throughout my teen years. And honestly, up until I cut her out of my life at about 24 or so. Um, and that is just an entirely separate issue from the misophonia
Oh,
and
okay.
from the understanding of it. And so in this case, the misophonia was weaponized as a part of her abuse, but not necessarily just because of it being misophonia.
Yeah, gotcha. And any, I mean, I'm not going to pry into that, but any, was there any roots of that taking root maybe from those early years when you have, when you were starting to develop misophonia, do you think? Or no, it was completely separate, started later on.
No, it definitely developed
Okay.
over time. It developed over time. Yeah, it went from, you're not allowed to ask these questions of people. This is our environment, not yours, to
Hmm.
you're being the big C.
Yeah, yeah,
you're,
yeah.
you're being crazy. Like you can't ask that stuff of people to no, you're absolutely out of your mind. That's not happening. It's something else entirely and just gaslighting. So it was something that developed.
Yes,
Yeah.
gaslighting. I guess what I meant was I was just curious if that side issue that resulted in you cutting out your mom, that
Oh,
abuse,
sorry.
if that no, 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 it's fine. I'm trying to like be sensitive about the question, but I'm just curious if there were any maybe roots or hints of that, whatever that whatever that those issues from the early or your early years, like before five kind of thing, or if it was something that just came later completely.
No, it definitely did have roots. And I can say that because I'm in therapy and my therapist
Hmm.
told me
Hmm.
that.
Okay.
But, I was describing my idyllic childhood and she was like, Jay, that sounds like abuse.
Yeah.
So, it just, yes, it was definitely something that started in my early years, specifically around when my younger brother was born. That was when my dynamic with my mother changed entirely.
Hmm.
Um,
Okay.
and became a lot just we stopped being very close. She much preferred to be close to my brother. And I
Mm.
have an assumption, I'm not personally a mental health professional, but I have an assumption that that was because he was the more quote unquote normal one of the two of us.
Mm. Interesting. And then that was the normality. Obviously, misophonia is probably part of it. Was there anything else that uh, she preferred him for over you?
Yeah, so he was a lot more outgoing than I was.
Mm.
I was, sporty and on a lot of sport teams and stuff. I actually did synchronized swimming for a number of years.
Ew, that's
But I
cool.
would,
Yeah.
yeah, it was super cool. It was like, yeah, it was awesome. I miss it every day. But um, I would much have preferred to be in my little treehouse type deal or up in my bedroom, just quietly reading a book. That was just my thing. And
Hmm.
um, she thought that I should be more social and, had a lot of issues comparing me to what she was like when she was a kid. So there were
Mm.
just these expectations placed upon me that I needed to be a certain way, kind of like a quintessential popular girl. And I just wasn't that. Whereas my
Yeah.
younger brother was. He was a very social and fun kid, and that seemed to be more relatable to her.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay.
Hmm.
Well, I guess yeah. Getting back to yeah, I just want thank you for doing that.
Yeah, no
I just
problem.
want to get that kind of complete picture from well, as complete as we could sum up in a few minutes. But just kind of want
Yeah.
to get that lay of the land, just because having heard a lot of interviews, often there is some issues with the parents that can result in walking on eggshells and just kind of like confusion and
Hmm.
the brain kind of being trained to look out for um anger or weird expectation issues. So
Hmm.
just wanted to
Absolutely.
put it out there, just for people listening who might be able to relate. Okay, so and by the way, did your brother notice your? Sounds like he probably would have noticed that you were having sound issues. Did he ever, I don't know, use it against you too, or maybe support you, or not even noticed?
Yeah, right. I mean, I don't know that he necessarily noticed because it was a problem I dealt with my whole life and thus his whole life.
Hmm.
I think he only noticed when my mom started pointing it out to him as being unusual. Um, he never really used it against me, not the way that my mom did. uh, he didn't really participate in those issues, like when I would be, being gaslit in the car and stuff and being called names. He didn't really participate in that, but he certainly didn't stand up for me.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
which I,
Okay.
I didn't expect because he's, 7 years younger than I
Yeah.
am. He was a little kid. But yeah, he didn't really, even as an adult, he has never stepped in about that.
Were you being called names related to misophonia?
Oh, absolutely. I was.
What kind of stuff, if you don't mind? Just we love to kind of hear what the others call us, or at least I
Yeah,
am curious.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was mainly just a couple. Like, it was mainly just being called crazy, very specifically being
Hmm.
called crazy, or like weird. She would accuse me of being autistic, which, why weaponize a mental health disorder as a
Wow.
mental health professional? Like, it's so stupid. Yeah, she
Yeah.
was like, only autistic people are like this. And I was like, well, that's a weird thing to say, but
Yeah.
okay.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So mostly it would mostly revolved around mental health because that's her profession and that's what she
Right.
knows.
Right. Okay. Um. And what about your? Where was your dad in all this?
So he and I had a better relationship for most of my life, and we're actually very close now. But prior to him divorcing my mom, he just divorced her actually a couple years ago. Thank God. But
Hmm.
he didn't really step in, and he told me later. I obviously don't know if this is the case. I have no way of verifying, but. He told me that he would have talks with her, like, hey, you're being pretty harsh on Jay. Like,
Hmm.
shouldn't you like chill? And
Hmm.
she would basically override him. She's a very strong person, and she would override him, saying, no, I'm the mental health professional. I know what I'm doing. You have no right to question me, etc. So in a way, it was also abusive of him because he just sort of stepped back and just enabled her to do whatever she wanted.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay.
Hmm.
Interesting. Okay. So you right. Okay. Where are we now? We're I guess in like high school, college, and then how about let's just let's talk about maybe friends. How did did you? It sounds like you didn't mention to anybody, but I'm
I told
curious if
nobody,
yeah. Okay.
nobody, absolutely not. Mm-mm.
Did your friends trigger you at all? Maybe start there, or
Oh, yeah, of
yeah.
course. I had one friend in particular who, unabashedly loved to chew gum, which to me is the worst.
Hmm.
It's the worst trigger for me. I mean, just I can't stand it. It just kills me every time. And I I never wanted to hurt her feelings or, make her feel bad or anything. So I never said anything to her. And I never told anybody I have misophonia ever until probably the last like 4 or 5 years, maybe.
Hmm.
Um, just because it had been so stigmatized my entire life and used as a weapon against me that I just never felt safe to. So none of my friends knew. All of my friends triggered me constantly, but I never said anything about it because I didn't want to invite that drama.
Yeah. How did you deal with it with your friends? Was it like the flight situation?
Yeah, so when possible, I would leave,
Hmm.
um, if I could. I oftentimes would clench my fists so hard that my nails would cut my palms.
Hmm.
Um, I would, pinch my thigh to distract me. I'd bite the inside of my mouth or my tongue or my lip. Um, just anything to distract me so that I wouldn't do or say anything.
Just to feel something different, feel a
Yeah,
different kind of pain.
yeah.
Did you, I don't know, bring headphones or earbuds or anything to situations, or what were some of your other coping mechanisms if you had any?
Yeah, I definitely I was pretty attached to my headphones. I'm gonna
Mm.
age myself a little bit. I loved my iPod.
Hmm.
And
Hey, I
I would
loved my
have it.
Walkman and my Discman in the 80s and
Oh
90s,
my
so it's
I had a pretty sick Discman for a long time,
hmm.
and it finally just it dropped out of my hands one day and died, and I've never been sadder. That was like the worst day
Yeah.
of my life. But yeah, so I would take that with me, and I would have earbuds, and I would get noise canceling ones if I could afford them, on babysitting money and stuff like that. But in social situations, I tried really hard not to use them because I wanted to be present and I wanted to hang out with my friends. Um, so it was mostly flight and fight with myself.
Yeah, yeah. What about at work and stuff, work situations?
So work it actually wasn't that bad. I worked basic jobs throughout my teens and 20s, like retail.
Hmm.
I only recently started working at an actual office job. I'm actually a paralegal,
Mm.
and I started doing that within the last 5 years. And that was extremely difficult, because you have the deathly quiet corporate office,
Yeah.
and every sound is amplified. And I discovered that if I just wear tiny wireless earbuds, nobody notices, and I can just listen to podcasts or music, and no one will say anything. For the most part, some people, when they would come up to talk to me, would have to like wave in my face to get my attention. But other than that, they didn't really care. I work with a bunch of attorneys who really only care about my work product. So as long as I'm producing good work, they don't really mind if I wear earbuds to do it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's one of the good things about a lot of these. Well, even this work from home. Are you actually working from home now? Maybe since COVID, or are you still going
Yeah.
to offices? Yeah. Okay.
No, I've been lucky enough to be able to continue working from home, and it's been awesome. Like I haven't had to deal with any of the triggers in the office. I don't have to go out to lunches anymore with people and sit there and silently die inside.
Oh God, I always wondered why I did not like work lunches. This is long before I knew what misophonia was. I did not like work lunches with my coworkers, and I just thought they were always. I thought maybe I just thought they were boring, which they probably were too. But
Yeah, they are.
having to then like cringe, anticipate triggers, and be bored was just like hell.
It's
Maybe that's why
so
I never really got
much.
promoted. But
I know, right? Yeah, it's been great working from home, and I'm actually finishing up my bachelor's degree at the same time, and
mm,
I'm doing that remotely, and I like that is by far my favorite part of all of this because being in quiet classrooms, especially during tests and exams and stuff, that was a nightmare.
yeah,
That was an absolute nightmare, and I never saw it. any sort of disability service or mental health disability service
Mm-hmm.
for that because I didn't think it counted. I didn't realize until recently I could have just gotten a note from a therapist, but
Or not
hindsight's
even. You don't even
2020.
need a note. Yeah, just it's part of the ADA. You can get accommodations without having to get a doctor's note for.
Oh, there you
So
go.
yeah,
That's amazing. I so wish I had known about that. I would have just worn giant sound canceling headphones every
yeah.
day and nobody could
No,
have said
most people don't.
anything.
Yeah, most people don't know about that, but that is true. Um, yeah, that's great. And what do you can I ask? What are you getting your degree in? I'm just curious. Like, are you thinking? It sounds like you've had some decent work experiences. Are you thinking? Is misophonia part of your thinking as you're planning
Yeah,
your next career move and whatnot?
totally. Yeah, no. So I have a couple of associate's degrees already. I have one in social and behavioral sciences,
Hmm.
another in German. I also have a German language certificate, but my bachelor's, ironically, is in psychology.
Maybe not ironically. Are you like going to change the world of misophonia with this degree, hopefully,
I
or
wish.
yeah.
We'll see. I mean, I kind of dig the little niche I've worked myself into at my corporate job, but I mean, maybe I can use that to fund a master's degree and maybe I can do some research.
Yeah, no, I just, I'm just curious if misophonia kind of played a role in helping you decide to pursue this particular degree.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I've always been very interested in psychology. I don't really think about misophonia a lot because I try not to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the more I think about it, the worse the triggers are for me. So maybe not intentionally, maybe subconsciously, I did.
Yeah, no, you make a good point. I mean, a lot of us, we we feel it so intensely during a trigger. The rest of the time, we really don't want to think about it. I mean, I do because I have to do the podcast, but like, it's something we generally don't want to think about. So that's interesting, but yeah, obviously you seem to have an interest in this, and maybe you'll make up for your mom's your mom's maybe failings in the psychology arena. I'm sure she did great work for some people, but I don't want to
She's a
criticize anybody.
wonderful therapist. Yes. Yes, she's a great therapist, just not the best
Not for
mom.
misophonia, or yeah, okay,
No.
yeah. I won't comment on her mothering, but it sounds like there were some issues there. Definitely not a
Just a few.
misophonia, not an ally of misophonia. Let's put it that way.
Not at all.
Okay, so let's see. Okay, so yeah, then I guess then you said yeah, I guess around 4 or 5 years ago you heard it had. So that was okay. So that was your mom googling it. So this is before you cut her off. It sounds like
Yes, so she
okay.
actually Googled it when I was a young teenager, probably 14 or
Oh,
15 years old. Yeah.
right. Okay.
Um, yeah, and she presented it to me and was like, I found out what you have and it has a name and stuff. And I was like, oh my God, that's crazy. And then she was like, yeah, never tell anybody about it. Um, this is a secret. And I was like, wonderful. Um,
Any elaboration on that? Did you tell, or was it just the obvious that she was embarrassed by it, probably, or that you have it, or she just didn't think much of it?
oh, absolutely. It was part of
Oh
it was a
man.
reflection of her, of course, that her daughter has an issue and it's, potentially a mental health issue. God forbid.
Oh, so it could have
Um,
been anything. Like she just didn't want to project any weakness um,
yes.
of her kids to the outside world.
Yeah, well, not necessarily weakness of her kids, but just anything that made her look less than perfect was absolutely
Mm,
unacceptable. Additionally, because so little was known about it and is known about it, that's always very scary. And she didn't want me to be a medical mystery. She needed me to be absolutely perfect. So, yeah, a lot of it was because it reflected badly on her.
mm,
She used again the word crazy. This is what
hmm.
crazy people have. This makes you sound crazy, so you can't tell anybody about it.
Okay. Um, Gee, wow. Okay. So This is
I'm so sorry.
yeah, no, this is I'm smiling at which is not I shouldn't be smiling. This is so yeah, it's just interesting. I mean, a mom
It's
and mental health professional, and but it's this is what we deal with. I mean, this is what we deal
yeah.
with. Wow. Okay, so and then eventually, yeah, like you said, it wasn't misophonia related completely, but you cut her out of your life, so there's no communication with your mom anymore.
We're currently low contact.
Low
Very,
contact.
very, very
Okay.
low contact. Yeah, but for a number of years, I want to say, so that was probably when I was like 24. So like probably for about 3 years straight, I did not speak to her at
Hmm.
all. And I only opened up a little bit with her because I felt like I should give it the old college try,
Yeah,
like,
there you go,
you know,
champ.
you just like really, really stick my foot in the door. And also because, all I've ever wanted is for my mom to love me. That's all I've ever wanted. And I would die inside if I didn't at least give that like the smallest chance. And I know a lot of people view me being low contact with her as kind of a weakness, like Jay, you really shouldn't be letting her back into your life. But it does something for me mentally.
Yeah, so
I
it sounds
can
like, I
look
mean,
back on,
you it's not something you wanted, but something you had to do. The
yeah,
cutting her off. Yeah, okay.
absolutely. Yeah, no, it wasn't, I did not want to do it, but I had to for my own mental health. And
Mm,
I also had to allow like some low contact for a lot of reasons, but mainly because if, the world ended tomorrow, I want to know that I did what I could to salvage any vestiges of this relationship.
gotcha. Okay.
Hmm.
Um, and so I guess how's your then? Okay, so how's your misophonia then been kind of? I guess recently. I mean, it sounds like work and school are pretty remote. You found out how to name quote unquote thanks to your mom, but you said also kind of in our little pre-roll here that you just found out in the past year or so that there was a community. Are you starting to learn more about misophonia? Is it ramping up in its uh, problems for you, or I guess, yeah, how's it been
um,
recently?
I'm dipping my toes. So I I started talking and acknowledging that I have misophonia within the last like 5 or 7 years, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm engaged and my fiance is very supportive. I told him super early on in the relationship that, these are the issues that I have. These are my triggers. Please don't mess with me.
Yeah. So you told him, but you said you don't. Otherwise you haven't told anybody.
Yeah, not really too many other people. I
Okay.
only told him because I felt safe. He was the first person that I really felt safe telling that to because, as you might imagine, I have an aversion to mental health professionals and I don't really have a lot of them in my life.
Yeah.
So I hadn't really told anybody else, but we were getting serious and I wanted to do our relationship long term, but I could not take another day of pretending that I wasn't triggered by stuff when I was. I couldn't do it. I couldn't pretend anymore. And it had already destroyed my mental health for decades. I needed to have someone and somewhere that I could be not triggered and be myself and just have like a normal day.
How did you approach that initial conversation? Because I'm sure a lot of people are in a similar situation.
Yeah, I mean, it was nerve-wracking. Me personally, I just sort of jumped both feet in. So I word vomited all over.
Hmm.
I came with a printout of what misophonia was, and I sat him down and I said, I have this. I haven't told you about it because I was scared and I was embarrassed, but this is what I have. This is what I feel when I am triggered by sounds. These are the sounds that trigger me. And then I got even more specific and I said, these are the sounds that you make that trigger me. Um, and I can't live like that. So if this is, if you can like accommodate me with this and if you can work with me on this and try to be understanding, um, and to understand that I am not reacting to sounds that you make because I don't like you or because I am trying to control you or anything. I don't have any control over my reaction. If you can understand that, then we can move forward together. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. 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 And how was his reaction there?
He was very supportive. He was confused at first.
Why? What
He
could
had
you
never
possibly be?
I know,
Yeah.
right? What could possibly be
Yeah.
confusing about any of that? But he had never heard of it, of course. Who
Right.
has?
Right. 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 Right.
So he asked for clarification, and but other than that, he was really, really supportive and still is. Like he absolutely will not chew gum. He won't do it.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
that's been very
No, that's
helpful. And anytime I tell him like, "Hey, that's triggering me," he might get a little irritated sometimes if he's like grumpy and tired. He's like, "I'm not doing it on purpose." And I'm like,
yeah.
I know, I'm so sorry."
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but other than that, he's been great.
And then your current therapist not wanting to disturb the therapist patient confidentiality, but like, did your therapist know? Has any therapist that you've had know what misophonia is, other than your mom?
The mom. No, like I've only had like two, three therapists, I think, in my life. Two of them were for a period of less than a month, and I got freaked out and left.
Mm,
Um, but I did mention misophonia to my current therapist, who I've been seeing for a few months, and she had never heard of it. Um, I got to educate her and tell
yeah.
her about it. Nobody, I've spoken to a couple mental health professionals aside from her, just in a neutral situation, like I
Mm-hmm.
happened to meet them for lunch or dinner or something, and they were like a friend of a friend.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever heard of it. Nobody's heard of it at all.
Wow. It's funny. Well, not funny, but I mean, the therapists that I know that know about misophonia, that's all they do now because they're so overwhelmed because these other jokers don't have never heard of misophonia. So it's like and I mean jokers as a joke. But
Yeah.
it's just like there's because there's so much demand and no one knows about it, that the people who do know about it, they are like overflowing with people.
Well, and another thing too is that I don't think that they've really, I know it's not in the DSM, and that's because it's not necessarily a psychiatric
Mm-hmm.
disorder. And that I think is part of the problem is that they don't know what it is. I've heard people tout it as a psychiatric problem, which is absolutely off base, and those people should be catapulted into the sun. No violence intended. Um,
It's a
I've
safe
heard it
space. You
touted.
can talk about violence. It's fine. Just don't act on it.
I will never catapult anybody
Yeah.
into the sun. I can promise you that. But, it's been a psychiatric disorder. I've heard people tell me it's an audiological disorder, which I absolutely disagree with because you can, I'm sure you can relate. I'm triggered by the mere thought of my
Mhm.
triggers. If I
Well,
have on sorry, go ahead.
I probably came in prematurely, but yeah, I mean it's not just audio, because as you may
No.
have is visual triggers that come into
Yes.
play, and then there's also all the senses. So, my current thinking is, I think, um, the sound part is kind of more of a canary in the coal mine, because sound. I was thinking about this recently, and I'm probably going to sound like a broken record on the recent episodes, but like I feel like for me, like sound is the hardest sense to kind of hide from, because you can close your eyes to not see things, and obviously like touch, taste, and smell are very personal. You can just not engage in those. But like hearing, like even if you block your ears, unless you've got like amazing noise canceling headphones or you're somewhere else, like you can't really get away from a sound. And so
Absolutely.
if your brain has been whether somehow learned to be um to react to sounds as being some kind of a danger, that's going to be the first thing you're going to notice, I think.
Yeah.
And then visuals will come after that, usually, and then other senses. But sorry, getting back to, I think I was trying to reinforce your point about it not just being an audio thing. I totally agree with that. I think it's much more than, ultimately it's much more than a sound issue.
It is, and I
So
absolutely agree with
deeper.
you
Yeah.
because, yeah, very much so. And I think that this definitely, like, I've heard it also called a neurological disorder, which I agree with because, I mean, if you think about this, like what you were just saying, like you can close your eyes to sights, but even if you have on incredible noise canceling headphones, you can usually still hear something. Most people can hear a lot better than they can see. Most, not all,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
it, it really goes to show that our fight or flight uh, response is like hyperactive, because
Hmm.
that I think is something that humans and the primates that we evolved from and everything have relied on in the past to tell them when there's danger, right? You hear a sound, you go, oh my God, that is scary. Do I fight? Do I run?
Hmm.
And for us, it's sort of devolved into an everyday into an everyday issue. But I do think very, very sincerely that this is a neurological problem. And I think that once I say the great they, I mean like medical community, once they actually classify misophonia and take an interest in it, then we can start actually maybe doing something about it and seeing if there's anything we can do to alleviate symptoms. Because as it stands right now, it's just sort of a free floating like phobia, like arachnophobia. Like there's not really treatment for that because it's just a phobia, and that's sort of how they're treating misophonia,
Yeah.
as like a personal problem rather than an actual disorder.
Yeah, yeah. It has been current definition, the so-called consensus definition that was released in the past year, does officially call it a disorder, but that's taken years to get to that
Yeah.
point to even call it officially that. Um, and yeah, I mean, I know it's an interesting time because I think there's still debate raging as to how, like, are you condemned by being born with it and there's no way out of it. I feel like there's something there is some I feel like there is some yeah, kind of a tug of war between. Well, there's a I think there's a back and forth between like there's a um, maybe a genetic or um, neurological component to it, but then it also can be flipped on or left dormant by your environment. For example, things that happen in your environment as you're growing up. I feel like there is some kind of a play between those two. Um,
Hmm.
but I think it needs to be a lot more research to figure that out. But I'm personally hearing a lot of common-ish stories of people having similar situations, like something difficult happening early in childhood, whether it's a single event or a chronic parental anger kind of issue. Um, and so I feel like the whole walking on eggshells experience seems to be quite common. And I feel like maybe that is activating something that we are predisposed to, our brains are maybe predisposed to um, turning on. So,
Yeah. Yeah, like maybe because we're being forced to walk on eggshells, it's making us more like it's activating our fight or flight response even
hmm,
further because we're being taught like this is a bad thing. You shouldn't be doing this. If you do this, expect an angry response, and
right.
it's just making everything worse. And I'd also be interested too if this is like if this truly gets classified as like a brain disorder. I'd be interested too to see if anybody had or how many of us had any type of head injuries as children. Because I know,
Mm,
kids run into stuff constantly, and I wonder if there's just like a particular spot on your head where if you hit it
hmm.
too hard, like it messes up with that stimuli.
Good. If researchers are, yeah, many different directions that we're, yeah, that we could be going to check
Yeah,
for
there's
this
so much
stuff.
to learn.
Um, so interesting. Okay, and so and so your current therapist, they're seeing you educated them on misophonia. Have they tried to address it at all, or is there just enough other stuff to get to first?
To be honest, she just sort of left it by the wayside. I don't
Hmm.
think that that was intentional. She probably looked it up and was like, well, I don't think there's much I can do there as a
Yeah.
therapist, so I will wash my hands of that, and there are other
Mm,
things going on that we want to focus on. But yeah, aside from when I mentioned it the first time and then followed up later and asked her if she had looked more into it, and she said yes. Aside from that, we haven't talked about it at all.
Gotcha. And I guess not to kind of rank things, but compared to all you know the other stuff that you're talking about, would you, in your mind, would you put misophonia kind of roughly near the top of like the things that kind of bother you?
Yes and no.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if I think about it if I think about it in an unbiased way, then yes, absolutely. And the reason I say no is because I have dealt with it every single day of my conscious life. And so at that point, it's just become normal for me. And so I
Mm-hmm.
don't really think of it as like this freestanding issue that I could potentially work on. As far as I'm concerned, I'm doomed. Like this is it. This is what I have and I have it forever. So I generally don't even rank it among issues that I'm personally having because it's just always there and it's always going to be.
Yeah, I mean, you've kind of expressed what I think a lot of feel, which is, well, I mean, honestly, kind of sad, right? That we just like this giant 800-pound gorilla in the room. We've kind of learned to just shove it into a tiny, tiny hole, and we've kind of even around a professional, we're like, well, there's probably no way I deal with this. This is normal for me now, and so I'm just going to keep
Hmm.
internalizing it. I mean, if
Hmm.
that therapist maybe had some ideas or had known about it, obviously you probably want to, and they would probably want to help you address it. But in the absence of that, yeah, we just to us, it's like just another day dealing with it on our own, right?
Absolutely. And I
Yeah.
liken it kind of to because I also have chronic migraines and I liken it to
Mm,
having a headache every single day of your entire life. Most people they get a headache, they take some ibuprofen, some Tylenol, Motrin, whatever your brand of choice is. You take it and you move on with your life. And if you have a week where you have headache after headache after headache, it's annoying. And you start to like question, like, oh, maybe there's something deeper wrong. But if you have a headache every single day of your life, you're not going to take meds every single day if it's
mm-hmm,
not something dire, right? You just move on with your life and get used to it because you have to live. And that's sort of, I think, what everyone with misophonia has done is they've just crammed it into the back of their head and never sought any relief because it just feels so chronic and so
mm-hmm,
lifelong.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. So interesting. Okay. Any we're getting. I guess we're getting into yeah, about well, north of 45 minutes here. So I kind of want to maybe talk about the present, and maybe we can get into kind of like other uh, things you've learned or final words kind of things. But now that
Mm.
it sounds like uh, you're bringing maybe your mom back into the picture. I'm just curious, like these folks that you've grown up with, um, have are you do you mention misophonia at all to your family members now?
No, no,
Okay.
not at all.
What about
Uh-uh.
extended family members? Anybody else? It sounds like nobody. I should
Yeah,
just.
no, definitely nobody. I know
Yeah.
my mom has talked about it too. I really only have extended family on my mom's side.
Mm,
My father only had one brother and they were not close. So I'm not really close to the cousins on that side. And they're very, very few regardless. Whereas my mom's side, there's a ton.
mm,
there's so many people on my mom's side of the family. And I know she's talked to them about it, but I never have. And I don't have a very close relationship with them anyway, as they live clear across the other side of the continent.
mm.
Um, and so I never really had a chance to have a super close relationship with them. And I honestly, once my mom had already told me that she had told everybody that I have misophonia, I felt such shame. Like I never wanted to bring it up again. Um,
Why did she tell them? Because she said that she didn't want to talk about it with anybody.
I know. She's full of contradictions, my mom. It wasn't anything kind, to be sure. It was more of like, oh, I'm such a martyr. My daughter's got this and it's making her crazy. And look at
Mm,
all this work that I'm doing and having to do to mitigate it. And it was sort of more of a complaining sesh.
yeah, it's more about her.
Yes, absolutely. Everything is. Not to
Yes,
sound
we're
salty or anything, but
yeah. No, no, no.
no
That would come
saltiness, none
from.
at all.
Um, Okay, okay. And what about your fiance's family? Do they know about it?
No, not at all, and for very different reasons. My fiance is a person of color. He's not African American. I don't want to say too much about him to identify him or anything, but he is not an American citizen by birth. He's from a completely different country.
Hmm.
His family is from a completely different culture. Mental health is not recognized as an actual issue there, as
Mm.
as it is in a lot of other countries. And so anything related to mental health or struggles of that nature, anything that could be even misconstrued as mental health is just not talked about. And so just out of respect for that, obviously I'm not going to just, thrust my
Yeah,
800-pound gorilla, as you said, upon them. They wouldn't understand it and they wouldn't appreciate it. And it's just, it would just make our very good relationship a little weird. It would color things for them. And I don't want to I just don't have the skill set to be able to broach that, so I'm not going to.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I tell misophones just do things on your own terms. We've dealt we've dealt with this every day. We've dealt with
Hmm.
other people's reactions every day for our entire lives. So I think once we recognize what it is, we should give ourselves the grace to kind of like trust our instincts in how we deal with
Yeah.
it. So
Yeah, and honestly, like using the royal we here, like we have dealt with enough. Like
yeah,
if you need to avoid that conversation because you're tired
yeah,
of having it, like don't have the
yeah,
conversation. That's
yeah.
fine.
No, I do that. Even though I have this podcast, I'm like, I don't have time to like be Mr. Public Awareness to people who don't, have misophonia. I'm more about just helping us heal each other and share our own stories and share tips like this, where, just, yeah, if you don't want to have the conversation one day, don't do it. Don't you, yeah, the royal we've dealt with this more than enough. And, let's work on ourselves and get tips from each other and leave it at that.
Yeah, honestly. And additionally, not to sound harsh or anything, but it's not our responsibility to educate every single person on the
Hmm.
planet about misophonia. We can educate as many people as we want to, but as soon as you don't want to do it, it's okay to stop. If
Yeah,
someone is genuinely curious, they can Google it. We have the Google,
yeah,
like they can
yeah.
look it up.
If they
They can
don't,
look up an
then
Instagram group.
maybe it's in the Encyclopedia Britannica by now. Who knows? But yeah, there's ways to
Yeah.
or phone a friend.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no, this is interesting. Any other yeah, any other like words of advice then to other misophones? It's like you haven't really talked to any other misophones, but you have opinions. So I'm
I
curious
have so
to.
many thoughts and
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
opinions.
yeah. Please, please.
Yeah, I really don't know anybody else who has misophonia at all. You're the first person I've spoken to who does, but I have a lot of very strong opinions and I just I don't have too much else to say except like if something makes you uncomfortable, like you can totally pull yourself out of that situation. Like if you're sitting at dinner and somebody is chewing really loud and it's making you extremely, extremely uncomfortable, you can just get up and go. Like
Hmm.
I'm sure a lot of us are adults, and even if we're not, like we're allowed to have boundaries. And like, sure, you don't have to be a jerk about it, but you can get up and walk away and say, I'm gonna need a minute. If they don't know that you have misophonia and you don't want to tell them about it, you can excuse yourself to the bathroom as many times as you need to. Like it's none of their business why you need to get up and walk away. Just take care of yourself. And I just don't
And,
want
and
anybody to
honestly,
internalize it the way I did.
honestly, any other condition, I might be exaggerating, but any other condition, even if you made up a freaking word, like that would be taken more seriously than if
Yeah.
you tried to explain what misophonia is.
Yeah, because everyone's like, oh, it's just a pet peeve. Like,
Yeah,
absolutely, it is not. And it's not like you have control over your reaction to these sounds, I totally agree with that. And just hearing that makes me so mad.
uh, well, I don't want to make you feel mad. Oh, I'm going to be you. This should be camaraderie. We're on the same page. Do you have you ever had? I had a couple of job interviews in the past year or so, and where the person interviewing me said something like, "Oh, I have a mild misophonia, I think." I'm like
What?
I'm like, oh, come on,
You
this
know,
is not
I
going to
actually
work.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? I'm going to say a hard pass to this job and good luck
Yeah.
to you. But one person did.
I mean, I
One
don't
of
want to
the
judge
few.
anybody, but it's like I can tell from that
No,
person that it was just like it kind of like wanting to everything has to kind of be I could tell it was like everything would have to be about them, and so
of
they
course.
they just want to feel like they know everything and
Well, and it's
experience it.
minimizing it, right? Like
Yeah.
if everybody has it, then nobody does. It's also, it's similar to when people are like, oh, I have to make sure to clean my bathroom once a week because I have OCD. It's like, absolutely no, you don't have OCD. OCD is debilitating. And you know what else is debilitating? Misophonia. If you don't like certain sounds, but you don't feel like you need to run out of the room or like tear your head off physically, you don't have misophonia
Hmm.
and you
And it's
shouldn't be appropriating that.
and it's not just because we are you know easily ticked off or something. It's not like
Yeah.
it's different than like anger management or any other kind of like gross aversion or whatever. It's like it's neurological slash past experience. I don't want to say I don't want to. The word trauma is kind of a loaded term, but it could be
It
very
is
much related to
traumatizing.
something that it's traumatizing in itself, but it could be related to like we talked about earlier, just other issues,
Hmm.
stresses in the environment growing up, which again, I mean, doesn't necessarily have to lead to misophonia. It could lead to many other things. Misophonia just happens to be well, one other thing, um, but it happens to be the one thing that right now here in 2022, it's still taken as a joke.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And it's like the least funny joke I've ever been told. Like, this is not funny and it needs to stop.
um, and yeah, okay, so yeah, any other? I'm trying to see if we could explore any other your opinions because I'm sure there's tons of people who are listening who probably like been googling it a lot and have obviously go through it and have amassed opinions like um w- when you well I guess are you maybe on social media, like are you following the community online like anywhere or
I'm following a couple pages on Instagram at the moment. That's actually how I found you. I
mm,
can't remember the name of the account, but it popped up and it was like, oh, this guy's doing podcasts about misophonia. And I was like,
who's
what?
this weirdo? Yeah.
Yeah.
Why would you do that?
Yeah, I was like, literally, why
Yeah.
would you do that? What is wrong with
Yeah,
you?
that's kind of why I did it. I was like, it takes a special. Well, not say, no, I don't want to say special, but like, obviously these stories need to get out,
Yeah.
and putting myself out there, like putting yourself out there, um, and sharing, like bothering to spend this much time on something that society takes as such a joke. Like it takes a certain type of personality because we're just ridiculed so much our entire lives. So I felt like I think I have the personality to do it. Somebody has to do it, and
Mm.
so but I think I mean, it is helping a lot of people. The messages, well, not only do people come on, but the messages they get from people who don't come on is pretty heartbreaking stuff. And so it's good to hear stories like yours, your opinions like yours, because a lot of us have this debilitating thing, and we've had similar experiences. And so just the message I get from people saying that hearing these other stories like completely changes their life, or at least makes their past make sense. Is I mean,
Mm.
what gets better than that?
That's very interesting. Yeah. Yeah, it's having a community is almost always an asset, and especially with something like this, because like you've mentioned a few times, like this is just something that everybody thinks is a freaking joke. Um, and spending so many years thinking you're not normal and like you're all alone and stuff, it's depressing and you feel very isolated. And being able to tap into a community of people who understand exactly what you're going through is so valuable.
Yeah, yeah. Has it? Well, I guess we should. Yeah, maybe we should just start wrapping up soon. I was curious. Like, and the answer might be no, but has it? Has knowing that there's a community, just being able to kind of like go and hear other people's stories, has that kind of helped? Does it move the needle at all, or I don't know, given some kind of positive light on what you're experiencing?
It made me feel good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
I was relieved to know that there were to see even just from these few Instagram pages that I followed that there are a lot more people like me, but it also broke my heart because nobody should have to feel this way. Like this is a tough deck of cards we've been dealt, and I just like, yeah, my heart just breaks for everybody that experiences true misophonia. Like it is the hardest thing I've ever dealt with throughout my entire life, and I've gone through a lot of stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
it just I'm excited to see a lot more people reaching out and finding community in each other because I am always worried about other people's mental health, especially for something as chronic as this. And I just hope that um, it helps people feel not so alone and to know that they have support from other people because I never had that, and I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm so excited to see people reaching out to each other, but I'm just so sad that they have it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, maybe let's leave it on that note. Unless you have anything else to share. Thanks, Jay, for coming on and sharing everything here.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, I guess if I leave anything behind, I just, if anybody is just now like finding out what misophonia is and or has found out what it is and is starting to explore what that means for them and like the community and stuff and has spent a lot of their life feeling abnormal or like an outsider or alone, like you're not abnormal. This is just your normal. And you can figure out coping mechanisms for it. And even better than that, you have a community that you can reach out to that will support you and help you through this. And that is just, you know, the best pot. That's just the best thing, honestly. So lean into your community.
Yeah, I want to say, yeah, exactly. So that I want to, I always want to emphasize that the community is very understanding and accepting because all the reasons that we talked about, like that, we've been beaten down mentally or told that we're idiots and crazy. But also the weird thing I noticed, and one reason why I started the podcast is because at these conventions I talked to, when I meet people, it didn't take much to feel like you really understood the person because we've had so many similar emotions and reactions, and in some cases, like down to the situation experiences. And so almost is very surreal, especially if you, I mean, even if you listen to a lot of these episodes, how close some of our pasts were, even though we're, you know, different people culturally or demographically or whatever. And so, yeah, lean into the community. You will quickly find people, knock on wood, you'll quickly find people that you share a lot in common with more than just misophonia.
Yeah,
So,
that's so important that knowing that you're not alone.
mhm.
I
Well,
got to get to that convention.
you know what? I mean, it actually this what is it? It starts on the this year. It starts on the 15th. It's online only, but if you go to I don't know, you can Google it. But the
Yeah, yeah, I'll
Misophonia
Google it.
Association does a convention, and I'll be doing a. This will air probably after the convention, but I'll be doing just my talk on my less. It's just me just going on for an hour about my thoughts and lessons from like talking to hundreds of people. So
Cool.
yeah.
If there ever was a target demographic for a silent disco, we're it. Like, I like if there's another convention like with in the physical world, I
Hmm.
highly vote for us to have a silent disco because that would be absolutely ideal for all of us.
Yeah. Silent disco are also like really loud shoe, like My Bloody Valentine, like really loud shoegaze or heavy
Absolutely,
metal or
My
something
Bloody
like that.
Valentine, yes, or like AFI or something,
Yes,
yeah,
yeah,
like just the
absolutely.
loudest
So,
music possible.
oh, okay. That, it's so funny. I have dreamed about doing like a misophonia music festival where maybe it might be kind of like this is aging ourselves, like a live aid for mental health,
Yeah,
but all like misophonia is kind of like the main sponsor, and then all these bands come on to plug the more normal mental health conditions. But yeah, I've kind of dreamed about eventually having a music festival. Um, so that would
that
be
would be
funny.
amazing. I
Of
would
course, with a silent
absolutely
disco.
attend.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, okay, I'll sign you up. Um, Cool. Well, yeah, Jay. Yeah, this has been really fun, and yeah, I'm glad you're part of the community now. And thanks for sharing the stories. It's going to help a lot of people.
Of course, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about it.
Thank you, Jay. It's great to have you here sharing this story, and I hope you continue to be an active part of the community. If you like this episode, don't forget to leave a quick review or just hit the 5 stars wherever you listen to this podcast. You can hit me up by email at hello@misophoniapodcast.com or go to the website, misophoniapodcast.com. Easiest way to send a message is on Instagram at Misophonia Podcast. Follow me there, or Facebook at Misophonia Podcast, Twitter, we're Misophonia Show. Support the show by visiting the Patreon at patreon.com/Misophonia Podcast. Theme music, as always, is by Moby. And until next week, wishing you peace and quiet.